I want to start today with a very important shir, discussing the topic of money and discussing the topic of faith in money. Really, we're going to be using a book called The Garden of Riches, a book by Rabbi Shalom Arush, who's a spiritual guide to millions of people. And it's a book that got me out of the rat trap of debt, of owing a lot of money to a lot of people. And it's a book that's helped thousands and thousands of people to come to be closer to Hashem and to be financially independent and free of debt, which allows them to lead a very happy, successful, and productive life. I want to start out today by talking about a story or a drasha for Rav Shimshon Hirsch. Rav Shimshon Hirsch says something amazing. He says that the sin of Adam Arishon, when Adam was kicked out of the garden after he ate from the tree, it says that Adam Arishon, he was forced to work. And the pasuk says that by the sweat of his brow, he's going to come to earn his livelihood, or he's going to come to eat. Now, it's a very interesting commentary that Rabbi Shimshon Hirsch has, because Rabbi Shimshon Hirsch, he says something amazing. He says that when a person comes to work and do physical labor, a person doesn't sweat from the brow. A person sweats from the back. And when does a person really come to sweat from the brow? It's when he's nervous. When he's nervous, when you have to come to speak, like today I'm speaking in front of a camera for the first time, Baruch Hashem, we're going to start this book and we're going to take ourselves on a real journey of emunah, of success, of coming closer to Hashem. But when does a person really come to sweat? He comes to sweat when he's nervous. And the same is true of the curse of Adam Arishon. The curse of Adam Arishon wasn't that he had to go and to earn a livelihood from the sweat of his back. Doing physical labor is not that much of a curse. A lot of people enjoy physical labor. It's relieving, gives you something to do, it's healthy for the body, it's a stress relief. But that's not it. The stress of Adam Arishon, the curse of Adam Arishon, was that he was never going to know, or he was going to have to worry where his parnosa was coming from. You see, in the times of the Midbar, in the times that the Jewish people were really attached to Hashem, the parnosa came down from Shemayim. Each Jew had his allocated portion of manna that he would eat every single day. And he didn't need any more, or he didn't need any less. He was given exactly what he needed. And based on a person's emunah, based on a person's faith, would be how much effort that he had to do to get that manna that would fall from the sky. Even that manna was a test from Hashem. The people that had complete emunah in Hashem, that understood that all of a person's parnosa, all of a person's livelihood comes from Hashem, they would open the door. They would open the door and they would scoop up the manna, they would put it in, they would eat, and it would come to be as tasty as anything that they desired. They would eat from it, and so they would be finished. They would then be able to go and continue on with their lives. They'd be able to go and learn the Torah. They'd be able to go and do the mitzvahs that Hashem had already given them. They were relieved of the burden of the stress. Those people with less emunah, they would have to walk a little bit further, but Hashem still provided. And those people with even less emunah, they would have to walk all the way to the ends of the camp and spend the entire day looking for the emunah, but Hashem still provided. And they still got everything that they needed. So we see that really, that the curse of Adam Arishon and our person's real true test, because since it is the curse of Adam Arishon, the original sin, that it's really the true test and really the true means of coming closer to Hashem, really the true tikkun, the true rectification of coming closer to Hashem. We see that all of that has to do with a person's parnosa, a person's livelihood. So with the help of Hashem and the book The Garden of Riches, the help of our teacher Rav Shalom Arush, We're going to go on a journey that's going to bring you to have faith that your parnosa can also come without that sweat, without that toil, without that nervousness, without that anxiety. And you yourself could be relieved of not only the burdens of debt, but also the burdens of constantly worrying and wondering where your parnosa is going to come from. And from then you're going to be able to lead productive, happy lives. That you're going to be able to learn Torah. You're going to be able to come closer to Shem. You're going to be able to do mitzvahs. You're going to be able to be with your friends. You're going to be able to spend time with your family. You're going to be able to enjoy life. Because once a person comes out of this rat race of constantly having to worry about where his parnosa's income is going to come from, it opens up a whole new life to them. You're now freed of the burden of the punishment of Adam Rishon, and then you're open to do tshuva, to come closer to Hashem, to really do the purpose, the tachlis of this world. So B'ezrat Hashem, we're going to start, and with Hashem's help, we're going to read a little bit from each chapter, and we're going to then discuss also. We're going to talk about and really try and get into this book. Rav Shalom, he mentioned that it was his battle with parnosa, his battle with debts, that actually brought him closer to Hashem. His teacher also, Rav Eliezer Berland, also had tremendous debts. And he also said the same thing, that it was his problems with his debts and his ability and his finally his coming to understand that it was all in Hashem, and his tikkun, his coming closer to Hashem through all of it, that was the biggest gain in emunah, his biggest gain in faith. Rabbi Nachman, he says that a person's biggest test in life, his biggest test in faith, comes from his parnosa, comes from money. So we start, and the book starts, the debt disease. And it's a very interesting topic, a very interesting title, the debt disease. That is actually a disease from a sickness to have debt. It's a sickness. Why is it a sickness? Because the reality is, if a person came to have complete faith in Hashem, they wouldn't have debt. They'd understand that everything comes from Hashemayim, and all the parnosa is provided for from them, and they wouldn't ever need to have to come into debt. They wouldn't ever have to come into debt, because a debt is only a catalyst in order to come closer to Hashem. The stress of the debt is only there in order that a person should come to daven, should come to closer to Hashem. It says in the Gemara in Hagigah that there's nothing greater than poverty for a Jew. Why? Because when a person is in poverty, they come to rely only on Hashem. And even all the more so in debt. When a person is in debt, all he can think about is, how am I going to get out of debt? And when he runs out of sources, he runs out of avenues, B'ezrat Hashem, he'll finally come to Hashem, to daven to Hashem. It'll be a benefit to him. The debt will be a benefit to him. Today's generation suffers from a problem that has reached epidemic proportions. It's debt. In fact, in no point in human history has there been countries such as the United States that owe trillions of dollars. Not even on a personal level. The country itself is in a position of debt that it can never repay. Do we know what trillions of dollars is? Trillions of dollars is enough money to fill up this room and your room in your house, and every room and every house that's next to your house for blocks. It's a number that we can't even understand. And that's how much money the U.S. government owes. And they're never going to pay it back. And why? The entire society of today is all in a crisis of faith. None of us have a connection to Hashem. And therefore we are all plagued with this debt. We're all plagued with this disease. So many people owe money, many of them shrug their shoulders and claim it's beyond my control. It's a part of life. It's a part of life to max out your credit cards. It's a part of life to owe more money than comes in every month. It's a part of life to borrow from your friends. It's a part of life. They act as if debt is an evil decree that can't be rescinded. It can't be rescinded. More and more people are in debt today. Few are the individuals who actually manage to stay out of debt and to live within their means. Now, this book was written after the financial crash of 2007 and 2008, but I think it still all applies today. I don't think that since the stock market has recovered, since some of the housing markets have recovered, I don't think today we live any more out of debt than we did 6 years ago. In fact, I think we forgot all the lessons of 6 years ago and 7 years ago, and today we're back into the same position again. There's record amounts of credit card debt, there's record amount of mortgage debt, there's record amounts of student loan debt. There's never been a greater amount of student loan debt. From the time that a person walks into college, he's already in debt. He's basically becomes a slave from the second that he walks into college. We're talking about millions and millions of people that owe money that they're never going to be able to repay. But we're giving them an option to be able to repay it, to come out of debt. Some families are destitute. They simply don't have enough money to eat. Some can't understand how the poor seek to borrow money when they fail to make ends meet. And debt would be an understandable consequence in the case of the idle and the lazy who fail to assume responsibility for themselves. But we see that that's not the case. We see that it's not just the poor and it's not just the lazy, but we see that ever progressing and ever increasing amount of rich people are going deeper and deeper into debt. People with huge incomes, people with one and two salaries that their husband and their wife are scrambling to work 10-hour days, long days. They don't see their children, they don't see their kids, and still at the $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 salaries, and we see that at the end of the month or at the end of the year, they're still in debt. Seeing families fall into debt, it's a deep tragedy. Their time and their energy are squandered on trying to cover their bills. They run from bank to bank, from loan to loan, from person to person, trying to find new loans to pay off old debts in an attempt to juggle their finances. They never seem to have enough. Robert Kiyosaki is a very famous economist that's written lots of books on how to, what he says is get out of the rat race. How to get out of the rat race, where a person's income exceeds his debts. In fact, where a person's amount of money that comes in is to the point where he no longer has to work. We know that there are people in the world that money comes into them and they don't work. We see great Rabbeim. We see Rav Ovadia Yosef. We see the true tzaddikim of the generation, Rav Chaim. We see our own Rav Shalom. He doesn't work. In your terms, he doesn't work. The reality is they do work. They work in having faith in Hashem, and they work in spreading faith in Hashem. We see that these great rabbis, with their faith, are relieved of the burden, the stress of having to go and work on a job that we would call a job, a 9-to-5 job, or a job or a business job. We see that Hashem gives them, with their faith, Hashem gives them the opportunity to continue to work in faith. Hashem gives them the opportunity to be relieved of that debt, of the stress, and to do Hashem's work, to do mitzvahs, to come closer to Him, to bring other people closer to Him. We understand that according to Jewish tradition, a person should never go into debt. And what does going to debt mean? Going to debt means that he takes out a loan that he can't pay. Now, a person who takes out a mortgage for a house, and every month he knows he has a certain amount of money coming in, and he's able to pay that mortgage off, and he's able to buy the groceries, and he's able to buy all the things that are necessary that his wife asks him to buy, and all the things that are necessary for his children to have happy lives. That's not a person that we're talking about. That's not a person who's going into debt. A person, and our definition of debt today, is a person who borrows something that he can't pay back. A man who takes out and he can't pay back. We see that only in recent times have people been able to take out money and forget to pay back. Conveniently forget to pay back. People take their credit cards and they max out their credit cards. They say, okay, they gave me a $5,000 limit. I see I'm unemployed over here. I have $5,000 on this credit card. What am I going to do? I'm going to put $5,000 onto this credit card. And then what? I don't know. Am I going to pay it back? I don't think so. Maybe. It's a disease of only the modern times. It used to be that there was debtors' prisons, that a person would go to jail. A person would actually go to jail if he owed money. It's interesting, here in Israel, we're a little bit more strict than we are in America about owing money. When a person owes money to the government, he owes what's called arnona, taxes, they can lock him up on a very quick basis. If a person owes money a person doesn't have credit cards in this country. They don't really have credit cards. When you go to the bank, they give you what they call a credit card, but it's really a debit card based on how much money you have in your bank account. And even then, they don't let you take out the amount that's in your bank account. They only let you take out a certain amount, and you already have the money in your bank account. They don't really let you get into that over-the-head debt that they do in America. The people who owe money, they're living a lie, acting as if they don't owe anything to anyone. Some even have the nerve to think that the borrowed money is theirs, and they can do with it as they wish. While regarding the person who lent them the money as an inconsiderate villain who constantly hounds them, that's interesting. You owe money to the credit card company, then the money gets put into default, and what happens? The people who borrowed the money or really stole the money and didn't pay it back, they villainize the credit card companies. They're chasing me. The collectors, they're chasing me. They're chasing me. But you forgot to pay the money back. It was never your money. To understand the severity of failing to repay a loan, let's take a look at a rabbinical ordinance issued by Europe's leading rabbis, the Four Lands Council, over 400 years ago. The ordinance in brief includes 3 main points. If the rabbinical court judges find out that a person who is delinquent in repaying a debt is not working around the clock to repay that debt, yet comes up with all sorts of excuses as to why he does not have the wherewithal to pay, then as a first step, he's banned from the synagogue. He's not allowed to step foot in the community synagogue until he repays the debt. How many Americans, how many of us all, would be out of a place to worship? If after being banned from the synagogue, the debtor still fails to repay his debt, then his wife is banned from the women's section of this synagogue. She's not allowed to enter that section or any other section of the synagogue until her husband repays his debt. And if the above measures don't convince him to pay his debt, his kids are kicked out of school. What an embarrassment. The talk of the community. You're kicked out of school. Your wife is not allowed in the synagogue. We see that only up until very recent times, people took the issue of debting very seriously. Today, our standards, our morality has eroded. We don't understand how grave it is not to pay back these loans. We have to make clear that Jewish law concludes that the borrower is indebted to the lender. Our sages said explicitly, a borrower is enslaved to the lender. The borrower who does not have the means to repay his debt is similar to a slave, because he must work around the clock to do whatever is necessary to return the money he owes. A person, he might come to think, what do you want from me? I don't have the money. I'm not able to get out of the debt. And this is where I want to leave off today, that there's a very important concept in Judaism. The concept is, in the Gemara, in Makos, on Daf Yud Amud Bet, it says like this, that in the direction that a person wants to go, that's the path that Hashem leads them. Meaning, if a person wants to be a debtor, if a person wants to acquire things, he wants to have big eyes, he wants to be greedy, he wants to take things that aren't his, he wants to own possessions, that's the path that Hashem is going to lead him. But he's going to be in debt. He's going to owe on these things. These things are going to come to make him in some ways suffer. It's very difficult to be in debt. But now, with that in mind, for all of us out there that are in debt, or those that don't want to be in debt, or those of us who have managed to stay out of debt, the Gemara says the same thing. On the path that a person wants to go, that's the way Hashem leads you. So if you're in debt and you want to come to do tshuva, you want to come closer to Hashem, you want to come out of your debt, you want to pay back, and you really want to pay back, you really want to come closer to Hashem, you really want to understand how a person can come to have a life that's free of debt, that they're attached to Hashem, that they don't have an over-attachment to the material possessions of this world, that they're happy with what they have. If you really want to come to be a lender and not a borrower, a lender, a person who's able to give money for good causes, a person who's able to give tzedakah, a person who's able to give money to benefits, to help people, that's all based on a person's ratzon. It's all based on a person's will. It says clearly that in the path that a person goes, that's the way Hashem is going to lead them. The trick is to change our mindset. The trick is to come to a place where we want to come closer to Hashem, where we want to get out of debt, where we want to be able to do the right things with money, to serve Hashem with the money, that we're able to come to do the right things with the money. And when that happens, Hashem is going to relieve us of our debt. We're going to be able to come and to have more money, more things than you could possibly imagine, that you're going to be able to give money freely instead of owing money. With Hashem's love and help, Hashem's love and kindness, we're going to continue with our series, The Garden of Riches. And as we go and we progress through the book, we're going to learn how to take us out of debt and how to put us on a life of financial freedom and closeness to Hashem.